Beetlejuice is a dark fantasy and a horror comedy, directed by Tim Burton as a sequel to his 1988 film Beetlejuice. The film stars Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, Jenna Ortega, Justin Theroux, Monica Bellucci, and Willem Dafoe. After a family tragedy, 3 generations of the Dietz family return home to Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter Astrid accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife. This will be a spoiler-free review. First things first, the original Beetlejuice is an iconic 80s film, but I have no real attachment to it. I have no nostalgia for it. I actually hadn't seen it until earlier this year when I got to see an original 1988 35mm print, which was probably the best way to experience it. I haven't seen a print that old of anything. It is rare to get to see pre-90s film prints at all because they are often heavily deteriorated. Aside from a bit of fading on the colours, this print looked great. It sounded great too. There is something special about getting to see the actual film that so many have laid eyes on before you, and in its original run as well. There is so much love and history there. Even though I generally enjoy Tim Burton films, I am not a die-hard fan like many others, and found the film to be kind of overrated. It was fine enough, but I didn't love it, which is why I am clearly not the prime audience for a sequel. The trailers to Beetlejuice 2 didn't look very good to me, but the good word of mouth had me hoping that it would at least be mindless fun. It is true that the film doesn't want you taking it too seriously, but I struggle to call it a comedy because I just didn't laugh once. I was impressed by the fact that this didn't fall into any of the legacy sequel tropes though. The characters from the original are treated as if this is the continuation of their story, not that they are Easter eggs or a backdrop for less interesting new characters. It also doesn't retread over familiar ground story-wise. The aesthetic is much the same, but the plot feels fresh enough. As expected, Michael Keaton plays the role of Beetlejuice perfectly. He's a great actor. He is very versatile and iconic in this role. I love Winona Ryder, but I wasn't entirely satisfied with the direction that they took her character of Lydia Dietz. She perfectly captured the outcast goth teen in the original, and was a very proactive character. Whilst I didn't expect her to still behave like a teenager here, she doesn't have the same bite and drive that she once had. She is now the host of a supernatural talk show called Ghost House, produced by her boyfriend Rory, played by Justin Theroux. The thing is, Rory is the biggest douchebag ever, but not in a way that is fun to watch. He grated on my nerves and seemed like a largely pointless character. Everyone else knew he was no good, so how Lydia would allow him to take control of her narrative for so much of the film is beyond me, and I find their relationship a bit of a flat note to open the film on. The standout here is actually Jenna Ortega as Astrid Dietz, the daughter of Lydia. Similar to the case of Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, I have a grievance with Ortega being typecast in these sorts of films, but she gives a good performance and is the most interesting character to follow. She embodies a little bit of that outcast fire that her mother had in the original, even if she doesn't want to. Unfortunately, similar to her mother, she is way too quick to get attached to a sketchy love interest. These characters should be smarter than that. It is nice to see Catherine O'Hara back, but she honestly doesn't really do much in this film. This is part of my problem with the film. There are just too many characters that many of them don't feel like they get enough to do. Monica Bellucci is a great actress, but she is so unbelievably wasted in this film that you have to wonder why she was even in it at all. Her introduction involving a staple gun is kind of awesome and easily one of the best scenes in the whole film, but she does nothing after that really. Why do studios feel the need to add in so many new side characters in legacy sequels? I have noticed this in many franchise films. It happened with the Star Wars sequel trilogy as well. Willem Dafoe is another great actor who is utterly useless in this movie, and therefore his performance is rather pedestrian by his standards. This isn't a terrible film, but its lack of truly funny moments and its decision to retreat to familiar aesthetics made it feel forgettable and kind of boring overall. I see the original as having a lot of invention when it comes to its practical effects and production design. I was hoping this film would try to imbue some of the same innovation, but it doesn't. Aside from the introduction of Monica Bellucci's character, there aren't many quirky and fresh ideas here. The story is thankfully its own, but the visuals are more of the same. Aside from Astrid and Beetlejuice himself, the characters feel as though they lack drive, and the ending feels abrupt and directionless. I suppose that's in keeping with the ending of the first film, as I personally felt the same in that instance. I think there should have been more world building, and in the vein of the 80s Beetlejuice cartoon, Lydia and Beetlejuice should have had to properly team up in the afterlife on some kind of wacky mission and learn to work together. Interestingly, we do get a bit more insight into the backstory of Beetlejuice himself, which was definitely fun and a satisfying thing to do for a sequel. The screenplay is the major issue here, and I'm hearing myself humming this same tune over and over when it comes to Hollywood blockbusters of late. So many of them don't seem to lock down a great script before heading into production, and I can't fathom why. The story and how it unfolds is your foundation. It doesn't matter if you nail all the other bells and whistles. One of the biggest problems I have noticed with many modern Hollywood blockbusters these past few years is the lack of a tight screenplay that truly feels well crafted, that feels like all of its scenes matter, and that you can't remove any of them or you will mess up the flow of the story. You shouldn't be able to remove anything without confusing the audience. I am definitely not saying that this is all Hollywood blockbusters, but it is so many of them recently. They feel like a first or second draft. There are so many scenes in this movie that don't feel like they have purpose. They feel as though they are there to pad out the runtime, as if they are trying to justify making a film when they actually don't have the ideas. It shouldn't be that hard to hire experienced people and give them proper time to do their job. Once again, the overabundance of side characters is a major issue. The opening scene with the pills feels like it has no implications at all. I understand in theory why it is there, but if you have introduced something early in the narrative, you have to pay it off later or it just feels like time wasting. There is a scene where Astrid points out that a character has a lot of 90s vinyl and asks if he gets them off of eBay, and he says that he essentially thrifts them from old record stores. This may seem minor, but as a record collector this annoyed me because it breaks the immersion when things are not well thought out like this. Vinyl enthusiasts will know that whilst the practice of pressing LPs never stopped entirely, it largely died out around 1993 due to the emergence of CDs, and would not begin to see a mass production comeback until around 2007. Therefore, actual 90s vinyl is often expensive and hard to come by. Many 90s albums were not even pressed until the 2000s and 2010s, including some of the most iconic albums of the 90s, like Nirvana's Nevermind. So when I say that the script isn't tight enough, these are some of the reasons. I shouldn't be able to pick it apart like this. Unfortunately, I can. I cannot do that for the original. Even though I have no real attachment to the first film, it definitely is better than this one. Still, if you enjoyed the first film, then I guess you will probably enjoy this one, but if you are like me and are relatively lukewarm on it, harboring no attachment to it, then you may want to skip this one.